For the last 10 years, the MMO genre has, for all intents and purposes, been dead. I know what you're thinking. The servers are full, play counts are huge, cash shops are printing billions. You're right. It hasn't stopped making money. It hasn't stopped selling expansions. It hasn't stopped consuming our time. But, intellectually, it's been all but a corpse. We've been trapped in a temporal loop. We buy the WoW killer. We rush to level cap. We realize the end game is the same predictable loop we've played 1,000 times before. And look, there was nothing wrong with that loop in 2004. The first time, it was magic. The first time, it was an adventure into the unknown. But after 20 years of stagnation, after 20 years of being fed the exact same mechanics wrapped in different texture packs, it isn't magic anymore. It's a checklist. It's the arithmetic of engagement. We watch titans like Blizzard wait 20 years to release player housing, a standard feature from 2015, and parade it around like they just discovered fire. We watched Amazon burn mountains of cash on New World, only to realize that even infinite money couldn't make a stale formula feel new again. We watched Kickstarters promise the heavens and deliver scams. We watched Ashes of Creation spend 8 years in development, burning millions not to invent the future, but to build a high-fidelity museum to the past. Because even with the gloss of Unreal Engine 5, if your character still moves like a potato, if you're still tab-targeting static NPCs like it's 2004, you aren't innovating. You're just rendering nostalgia in 4K. This is the tragedy. We convinced ourselves that the only way to save the genre was to look backward. We accepted that the MMO 1.0 format was the end of history. We stopped asking what comes next. Instead, we started asking, how do we go back? But what if someone finally dared to ask a different question? And so, out of the silence, came Where Winds Meet, a game that refused to follow the script, a game that looked at the sacred rules of the genre and decided to break the frame. It combined the massive scale of an MMO with the fluid, kinetic violence of a modern single-player RPG. And the graphics? Look, I've played Cyberpunk maxed out, Red Dead 2, Black Myth Wukong. Where Winds Meet still made my jaw drop. Not good for an MMO, better than most single-player games, period. It looked like the first drop of rain in a 10-year drought. But when the Western MMO community finally saw it, they brushed it off. Meh, this isn't a real MMO. And to be rigorously honest, they're absolutely right. It isn't. If a real MMO means 50 players jumping on each other's heads to tag a mob, if it means returning to that stagnant formula, good. Let the genre die. Now, I know what you're thinking. Without the massive player count everywhere, isn't this just a lobby game? Fair question. The magic of MMOs was the chaos, the emergent drama, the world alive even when you logged off. So let me be clear. Where Winds Meet isn't perfect. It's not the final form of MMO 2.0. But here's what it is. It's a hypothesis. What if there's a way to solve the impossible problem? What if scale, fidelity, and responsive combat don't have to be enemies? What if immersion matters more than population? What if memory is stronger than presence? What if we've been asking the wrong questions for 20 years? Where Winds Meet is the first game brave enough to test these ideas. And the answers? They might just save the genre. But before I explain why, I need you to understand something. I didn't say the MMO genre was dead because I hate it. I said it because I loved it. For 15 years, like millions of millennials, this wasn't just a genre, it was the genre. Through high school, through university, while the world changed around us, Azeroth remained the constant. Before I ever made videos about cyberpunk or single-player RPGs, this channel was a digital diary of my life in MMOs. From pushing Keystone Master season after season in World of Warcraft, to the sunset vistas of Guild Wars 2 and Black Desert, I was there. I remember what that magic felt like. It wasn't just a game, it was a shared existence. The friction, the travel time, the danger, the need to group up just to survive. That's what forged us into a community. And this was amplified by the golden age of YouTube. It wasn't just playing the game, it was the culture around the game. The guild drama, the ninja looters. Watching Asmongold roast a transmog contest until you were crying with laughter. It was lightning in a bottle. For a decade, it was the only thing I played. I was content. I was home. Until Shadowlands. We all remember the Great Exodus. It wasn't just one bad patch. It was the crushing realization that developers were no longer designing for fun. They were designing for metrics. The systems became bloated. The grind became mandatory. The soul of the world was replaced by a checklist. So we became refugees. We drifted from WoW to Final Fantasy XIV, from Final Fantasy to Guild Wars, desperately looking for a replacement. But nothing captured us. The magic was gone. Like many of you, I exiled myself to the land of single-player games. I walked the neon streets of Cyberpunk 2077. I experienced the narrative depth of The Witcher. And when I finally stepped out of the MMO bubble in 2020, I was shocked. I found things I didn't know I was missing. Physics, fidelity, true immersion. I realized that while I was busy grinding rep in WoW for years, the rest of the gaming world had moved on. They had invented technologies that made Azeroth look like a cardboard cutout. I'd always told myself the lie. Well, to have multiplayer, we have to sacrifice graphics. We have to sacrifice combat physics. That's the price of the genre. But seeing Cyberpunk, I realized the distance had become too vast. We were sacrificing everything just to hold on to a 2004 multiplayer experience. But even as I fell in love with these new single-player worlds, there was always a ghost haunting me, a seed in the back of my mind. I kept thinking, imagine if we could have this fidelity, but shared. Imagine if we could have this combat, but in a living world. For years, I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't imagine how it would work. I just knew that I was waiting for someone, somewhere, to be brave enough to try. I waited, and I waited, and I started to believe that day would never come. But today, looking at where winds meet, I think the wait might finally be over. So why did it take 20 years? If the dream of a cyberpunk-level MMO is so obvious, why hasn't Blizzard or Amazon or Riot built it yet? It isn't because they're lazy. It isn't because they're stupid. It's because of a law of physics I call the impossible triangle. In MMO development, you have three corners: massive scale, high fidelity, and low latency. Historically, the rule is absolute. You can only pick two. If you want scale and low latency, like WoW, your graphics must look like a cartoon to run on a toaster. If you want fidelity and scale, like New World, your combat becomes floaty, weightless, and desync prone. The server tick rate simply cannot handle the math. For 2 decades, the Western approach has been compromise. They try to balance the triangle. They give you good enough graphics, okay combat, decent scale. The result is mediocrity. But where winds meet, The engineers at Everstone looked at that triangle and realized that if they wanted to achieve the dream, if they wanted that cyberpunk level of immersion, they couldn't balance the triangle. They had to break it. This brings us to a Chinese engineering philosophy. Maximize your strengths, cut your weaknesses. Or, to put it even more aggressively, don't compromise, amputate. They asked a dangerous question. Is seeing 500 players bunny hopping in the open world actually fun? Does fighting for mob tags actually add immersion? Does laggy, zerging world PvP actually make you feel like a hero? Their answer was no. Unconditional scale isn't a feature. It's a liability. It's the anchor dragging the entire genre down. So they made the decision that Western developers are too terrified to make. They cut it. They amputated unconditional scale from the open world to save the soul of the combat. By limiting open-world exploration to the protagonist, you and your party, they unlocked the computing budget to do things that are technically impossible in a traditional MMO. They gave us wuxia gravity, wall running, water gliding, air dashing. They gave us Souls-like combat, poise meters, deflections, martial arts physics that react in real time. They gave us a world where the wind actually shakes the bamboo, where fire spreads realistically, where the rain interacts with the cloth on your back. They realized that immersion might be worth more than population. Now, I say might be, because this is the experiment. This is the hypothesis being tested. And I'll be honest, I don't know if it will work long term. Maybe after 1,000 hours, players will feel lonely. Maybe the witnessed world won't be enough. Maybe the chaos was the content, and cutting it was a mistake. But here's what I do know. We'll never find out if no one tries. This isn't MMO 1.0 with better graphics. This is a fundamental restructuring of the genre's DNA. They destroyed the village to save the dream. And the result is the first online game in history that feels like a single-player masterpiece. So what does this actually look like in practice? How do you restructure an MMO around this philosophy? The engineers at Everstone didn't just delete the players, they sequestered them. They built a structure that respects the duality of the human gamer, the social animal, and the lone hero. MMO 1.0 tried to force these two modes to exist in the same pixel at the same time. The result was chaos. Where winds meet separates them. Walk into the capital city of Kaifeng. It's loud, crowded, chaotic, thousands of players. This satisfies the MMO itch. It validates your existence in a shared universe. But step out of the gates into the bamboo forests. The noise fades. The server shifts. You're no longer one ant in a colony. You are the protagonist. The physics engine wakes up. The combat becomes precise, heavy, reactive. But here's the genius. Where winds meet introduces a third state that MMO 1.0 never understood. The witnessed world. You just finished a brutal cutscene, a betrayal, a death. You're standing at a cliff's edge, processing it. In World of Warcraft, you'd see XX Dragon Slayer XXX bunny hopping in circles. Immersion broken. In Where Winds Meet, the cliff is empty, but the ground is covered in signposts, stone tablets left by players who stood exactly where you're standing. Not cryptic messages like Dark Souls, full paragraphs, images, some analyzing lore, some grieving, some cracking jokes, hundreds of upvotes. This isn't chat that scrolls away in seconds. This is memory. It's Reddit-grade sociality embedded into the world itself. You aren't sharing a combat encounter. You're sharing an interpretation. And they didn't stop there. They looked at every human interaction and asked, How do we turn this into a system? Want to lead a faction? You need votes, not just gear. Players campaign in world chat like it's an election. Want romance? There's matchmaking, not for dungeons, for dates. Want mentorship? There's a formal system connecting veterans with newcomers, not just for power leveling, but for building lasting bonds. One sect even allows polygamy. Marry up to 6 players for court intrigue and jealousy-fueled drama. All of this sits on top of the MMO 1.0 foundation you expect. Dungeons, raids, guilds. But they didn't stop at the skeleton. They built a living society on top of it. So where does that leave us? Is where wins meet the perfect game? No. Is it the final, flawless realization of the MMO 2.0 concept? Probably not. It's rough. It's experimental. It's trying to do 10 impossible things before breakfast, and sometimes it trips over its own ambition. In many ways, it's MMO 1.5. It's the bridge between the past we're clinging to and the future we haven't figured out yet. But here's the truth that actually matters. For the first time in 10 years, the bridge is open. And I need you to understand what that feels like. There's a moment, controller in hand, deep in the wilderness, when it all clicks. You're sprinting through bamboo in the rain. The wind bends the trees. Your robes react to the physics. You wall run up a cliff, air dash across a gap, and drop into a boss fight that responds with 0 lag. This isn't scuffed MMO controller support. This plays like Black Myth Wukong, like Ghost of Tsushima. But the world is shared. Then you port back to the city. Hundreds of players, jumping, PvPing, flexing transmog. That Goldshire energy, standing around doing nothing, but somehow it's still fun. All of this in one game. For 15 years, I was told this was impossible. Graphics or scale, action combat or MMO, immersion or multiplayer. Where Winds Meet said, watch. If we listen to the critics screaming, it's not a real MMO, we're choosing to stay in the museum of 2004, dusting off tab targeting for another decade, praying nostalgia will save us. I refuse. I'm tired of the museum. I'm ready for the laboratory. This game broke the frame, amputated the lag, weaponized the social systems. Yes, it sacrificed the massive Zerg in the open world. But look what we got. Combat that hits like iron, a world that moves like water, a social layer that feels like memory. And this gives me something I haven't felt since Legion. Hope. Because if this can succeed, imagine what comes next. Maybe tomorrow we get the scale back too. Maybe someone takes this blueprint and perfects it. But we never get there if no one takes the first step. Where Winds Meet took that step. So to everyone on the internet, holding their checklist, screaming, "This breaks the rules," you're right. It breaks all of them. We spent 10 years in the desert, begging for rain. The storm is here. Don't complain that you might get wet. Step out of the shelter. Put down the nostalgia. Look up. Because the genre isn't dying. It's waking up.